Hello, welcome or welcome back to World on a String Designs. I'm Alicia. Today I'm going to be telling you all about my extensive yarn stash, and we're going to quantify it and talk about my plans for how to use it. So I've been talking about this on my channel for a little bit, how I have a yarn stash that's a little large and I want to be a little more intentional about how I'm using it. And I want to be more aware of what I'm doing. So I don't want to just keep buying yarn without plans for it, or really I don't want to forget about the nice yarns that I already have in stash. A lot of the stuff in here, these are really great yarns that I was really excited to have, and I'm still excited about them when I remember they're there. Kind of the problem is they're sort of tucked away in storage and I don't interact with them much. So here's how I'm going to work on that. So the first and hardest part of this was the quantification of what I actually have. And I'd say probably at the end of 2024 and the beginning of 2025, I took several weeks and a couple hours at a time would go through the stash, pull everything out, make sure I had everything accounted for, and then I would photograph it and log it into Ravelry. So there is an export function in Ravelry, so I have pulled all that data out and analyzed it. So I have some numbers, and I'll be honest, these are a little sobering. So I knew I had a lot. I didn't know exactly how much. And I think knowing what these numbers are going to change a little bit the way that I purchase yarn in the future. Now, to be fair and upfront about how I have quantified this, this is my fiber arts stash, and it's sort of how I define it. So this is the yarn that I use for knitting and crocheting hobby things. Now, I do have other yarn that is not included in this group of stash. So this does not include my acrylic yarns, and it doesn't include my cotton yarn stash. And the reason for that is those types of yarns are used for different types of projects and different types of crafting. So they're not really my knitting and crocheting stash, although some of the cotton yarns were used for crochet. But I do tend to use them in different ways. And I would say at this point I'm not really using those stashes much anymore. So I will think of different ways that I might be able to use those. And I have a few ideas in mind. But when I look at what I have in my possession, I don't really consider those part of my yarn stash because I'm just going to use them in different ways. So that's how I've set this up. I have in my yarn stash 203,866 yards of yarn, which is equivalent to 115.8 miles of yarn. This is also equal to 70,642 grams, or 155.6 pounds of yarn. That's quite a lot. So next, one might ask, well, Alicia, how much yarn did you use in 2024? And that's a great question. So I will put a link or a card up linking to the video I did on everything I knit in 2024. And the data on that is I knit 8,146 yards, which is the equivalent of 4.6 miles. And it also came out to 3,400 grams, or the equivalent of 7.5 pounds. If I were to continue knitting at the pace that I did in 2024, how long would it take me to knit down the stash? Well, the answer to that, if we are looking in terms of yardage, is in 2024, I used 3.8% of my stash on a yardage basis and 4.6% on a weight basis. So that's about, if we take the average, 4.2% of my stash was knit down in 2024. And we're taking a lot of liberties there, right? Because I don't really know what my stash was at the beginning of 2024. Essentially what I've done is taken the end of 2024 stash amount and then looked at how much I used in 2024. But the reality is more things came in during 2024. So that's something to keep in mind. But approximately in 2024, I knit down 4.2% of the stash. So how long would it take me at my 2024 knitting pace to use all of my stash? Well, on a yardage basis, that would be 25 years, and on a weight basis, 20.8 years. So we're looking at, to average it out, 22.9 years. Yeah. So here we are. It's time to set some goals. So I'm trying to be realistic about what I'm doing. I'm not going to stop buying yarn, but I am going to be more intentional about how I do it. So here are my goals regarding my yarn stash management for 2025 and beyond. Goal number 1 is stash reduction over time. So that number needs to be coming down, and I do not wish to continue bringing in yarn at a faster pace than I'm using it. So I just feel like that's kind of wasteful, and I end up with a bunch of things that I would really enjoy using that I just don't even remember they're there. So that is goal number 1. And as part of that, one of the ways that I'm going to hold myself accountable on that is monthly updates. And I will do those on my monthly sock reveals. So when I finish a pair of socks and open the new bag for the next month's socks and reveal the pattern in the yarn, at the end of those videos, I'll give an update on my stash down challenge and how much yarn I brought in, how much yarn I've used, and where I stand on that. Goal number 2, all yarn categories must fit into their respective bins. So if I've been organized and prepared, you should see a photo up here of my closets where I have one closet that the yarn is in, and then the next closet has bins with fiber. We're not even talking about fiber here. So the unspun fiber and roving. I'm just talking about the yarn stash, but each weight has its own bin or bins, depending on which weight it is. And some of them are quite overflowing. So that's going to be goal number 2, is just to get it so it looks a little tidier in the closet and everything fits in their respective bins. So that means I'm probably going to make an effort to start with the weight of yarn that has overflowing bins. Goal number 3. I'd like to keep a ratio at least of 2 to 1, and that's 2 units decreased from stash for every unit I bring in. And that's not always going to be tidily within a month. I think I might work down some stash and not bring anything in one month, and then, bring in something for a project the next month. So like if I were to do a sweater and purchase yarn for that, obviously a sweater quantity, I'm not going to knit 3 sweaters in a month, right? So that doesn't make sense, but I could not buy yarn for the 2 previous months or something like that. So that is goal number 3. And goal number 4 is to limit acquisitions to 1 project per quarter. So I want new acquisitions to be only part of a planned project. I don't want to just buy yarn for yarn's sake with no plan for it. And I also want to only do 1 project a quarter with yarn that did not come from existing stash. So those are my goals. Hopefully I will do well. I will post an update along the way on how things are going with that. And yeah. And so, but I think this is a really good challenge for me for where I am right now in life. So sort of moving into like a little bit of the finance realm, I'd say probably 2.5 years ago, my husband and I decided we wanted to get completely out of debt. And a large part of that is, it wasn't that we were having financial problems. It was more just, I realized if I pay off debt, I can retire sooner. And if I can retire sooner, I have more time to knit and sew and do all the things that I really enjoy doing. And yeah, and I can knit down my stash faster. But it's just kind of where we're at right now. Like every dollar that I don't spend on yarn right now, we make more use of that money by paying down debt that we're paying interest on and then that decreases our dollar, as opposed to if it goes in a savings account and it's earning interest, then it increases our dollar. So this is a really good fit. I have so much in stash and things that I would love to work with. Why wouldn't I knit down my stash and really get some good use and enjoyment out of it? And like I said, it doesn't mean I'm not going to bring in new yarns. I'm still going to support my local yarn shops, probably not yarn shops that aren't local as well. And I'm still going to try new things. But again, I'm just going to pace myself and be more intentional about it. This is pretty eye-opening for me because this could be like a retirement's worth of yarn that I have here. So I'm open to possibly also donating yarn or things like that. I just haven't had the bandwidth to kind of go through and think about what I might want to, where I might want to donate, what I might want to donate, and all that. So that's a possibility as well. It's not necessarily that I feel like I have to knit my way through this mess that I've created. But yeah, so that is my 2025 Stash Down Challenge. And while we're here, let's talk about my whips, shall we? So for my first one, I have still the Winter League pullover. And this gets just longer and longer. And I have started on the ribbing on the bottom. So this has a split hem. And you knit each side separately, of course. So I am working on one side of the hem now. And then I'll go ahead and add the sleeves. I did knit this a little longer than the pattern called for. I do prefer, I'm not a big fan of cropped sweaters, so I like them to sit more at my hip than higher up. So I did knit a couple extra inches on this. And yeah, once we get that hem done, then we'll move on to the sleeves. And hopefully it will be a finished object soon because, well, it is still really cold here. But I want to get a chance to wear this a little bit this season before things get nice and warm. Although, don't get me wrong, I'm ready for warm weather. So the next item that I have is my scrappy blankie that I have been working on. And again, I'll put a picture. So the last picture, it was really scrunched up. It turned out, I went to spread it out and take a picture. It turned out the cats had chewed on the cord, and then it was just catchy enough that I couldn't slide the stitches over. So I was really limited to like half the cord, and it probably had been like that for a while, and I didn't worry too much about it. Like I just kept cramming the stitches in there and then flip it around and work from the other end. But I did order a replacement cord, and I have put it on the new cord and knit a couple of rows. And not a whole lot of progress on this. I will put a picture. But this is my scrappy blanket. And again, this does not come out of stash. Doesn't count as coming out of stash because these yarns have already been converted to scrap yarn, which doesn't count in stash. So even when this gets finished, it won't really bring that stash number down at all. So those have already been taken out of stash as the projects were finished. That's how they ended up in the scrappy bin. I did finish the February socks, but I am saving them for the reveal video, and that will be posted the first Wednesday in March. So I think that's March 5th. Keep an eye out for that, but I do want to save that reveal. And then I also have my hand-spun perennial hat, which I have not really done anything on. But now that my February socks are done, I should have more time to get to that. And then I also have my treadmill socks. So if you haven't seen my treadmill knitting video, I will put up a card in the corner. I did start this treadmill challenge where it's interesting that I'm talking about this on my stash down video. Treadmill yarn doesn't count as stash yarn. So this is an incentive. So I get to pick out a pretty skein of yarn, and then I can only knit that yarn while I'm on the treadmill. And I cannot buy more yarn for the treadmill until I finish the project that I have been working on before. So my goal on that is to do at least a pair of socks. I knit treadmill socks. You could knit if you wanted to do it. You could knit a hat or whatever you like to knit. It doesn't have to be socks. This is my treadmill bag, and this is where my yarn lives. This is where my project lives when I'm not on the treadmill. And I've made really good progress. So this is a little over a week. So I think we started on a Friday night, and I did 20 minutes that first Friday night. And since then I have used the treadmill every day, and I've done it for 30 minutes each day. And so I've just turned the heel on this pair of socks. And this is, so I think I'm getting a better lighting here than the last time I tried to show this. So this is One Lupin's Pemaquid sock base, and the colorway here is Botanical. That's better. And it is gorgeous. I'll flip it around the other side too. And I am really, really enjoying knitting with this. And I can't wait to have them finished. And this is on my mini minder. I am not really having a great time with the mini minder, so I cannot for the life of me, when it hangs, I just get it all caught up in this hardware. I am interested to try it out in the vehicle, because I do think, like when my husband drives, I usually knit. And I do think if it was higher, like so if it's hanging from the rear view, as I pulled down, I think it would come down fine. You can see like right here. And I might try to rig something up on the treadmill where this goes up, where I just put a hook up above and it hangs and then it pulls down. I think that would work better. But I just can't seem to get it to not, when it's being pulled up, I can't seem to get it to not get caught on here. And I'm not trying to imply that this isn't a great tool. I think there's other ways that I like to use it that other than walking on the treadmill. I actually keep it on this, and then I set it like this on the treadmill so it sits sideways on the cup holder, and then I just pull it right so it pulls off this way. But I like having it like when it sits on the table, keeps it from, like it does kind of tip and it'll roll around, but it won't roll away. So I do like that, and there's a lot of ways that I use this that are great that I just want to be honest, like if you're thinking about doing a treadmill knitting challenge, you don't need one of these. They're nice to have, but you don't need them. And I will try to be very intentional with this podcast that I might show you things that I use that I enjoy, but oftentimes you don't need them. So I will try to, whenever I show something like that, offer alternatives of how you could accomplish the same thing without spending money. So for example, you could hang a little bag on the treadmill, like a little shopping bag with handles, and just put it in there and pull it out, right? So there's different things that you could do. And I want to say that I did that. Actually, I think I used to just set the cake right in the cup holder and pull from there. I've gone on walks before, and where I was on a walking trail and knitting. And a lot of times I had just my project bag, because I use these, so I would have the project bag anyway, but I just sort of like half cinch it and hang it on my wrist and knit out of the bag. There were times I used a grocery store bag and knit out of the bag. So there are things that you could do with smaller projects, depending on what the project is and what time of year it was. I might just take the cake and shove it in my pocket and walk, and then just, give it a little tug here and there. So you don't have to have these extras. They are nice to have if you're inclined to get them and you want to spend the money and you want that little extra pretty and that enjoyment, then all the power to you. Go for it, right? Like, and I do if I want to. But I also I don't want to give a perception that you have to buy these things to enjoy this craft, because you really don't need to spend a lot to enjoy knitting. So there's that. Thank you for joining me today. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and happy stitching. See you next time.